washes, this takes a little bit of time at first, but the more you do it, you get used to it. My third block saw me kind of having to redo it a little bit and try it out. So I've got trays that are going to be over by the sinks since you need water. And when you get ready to do washes, you get a tray. I've got a couple of ice trays, and the rest I've got like little pill boxes over there. I've got a cup for clean water. So this is like my rinsing cup. And then I've got a cup of wash water that I use to mix my washes. So you can share as much stuff as you want to. I would say this probably can't reach more than 2 people or we'll dump it. So like you and another person could share this, and you could share these also and just change them as you go. So I've got my rinsing cup and I've got my wash cup. So when I get ready to start kind of testing out my washes, I actually just wanted to show you this first. So I really like using washes. If you want them to be darker, your paper is going to be really dry. If you want them to be lighter, your paper can be wet. And I think that it moves a lot more smoothly when it is wet. This light bulb that I've started that is nowhere near done, it needs many more layers. It looks so blended and smooth in some places because I worked quickly and I worked very wet. My paper was wet, my brush was wet, my hand was moving really fast. If you're like a slow pokey person that like is kind of messy or whatever, it's not going to be your friend. And then vice versa, if you're like super fast and speedy and sloppy and don't care, it's also not going to be your friend. So you kind of got to have a good mix, and you kind of need to have a plan of what you're about to do before you do it also. So I'll wet my paper and just kind of show you what ink looks like when it hits it. So all I'm doing right now is wetting my watercolor paper, and that's the paper that I'll give you to work with. So I'm wetting it. I'm going to take my ink. This is a technique called wet on wet, which is a watercolor technique. Goodness gracious, tighten that thing. I guess it was me. All right, so I'm making sure my paper is still wet. I'm going to take a little brush just to see what happens. Well, that was anticlimactic. Hang on. There we go. All right, so you can see it kind of starting to spread because my water or my paper is wet right there. And you can see like if I put it kind of around the edges, it's going to get wet there too, and it kind of does that. And you can kind of do this before you start your washes and just kind of play around and do it. I think it's really fun. If you get your paper wet and get something you don't want it in a certain place, so say you want to fix it, you have to work extremely quickly because you can see if I try to lift it, which is what this is called, it's still going to be there forever. So I need to work pretty fast to kind of soften things. So let's say I'm going to rinse and get some clean on my brush. Let's say I pick some of this up. So see how when I kind of move my brush quickly, it's kind of softer on the edges. And if I tap it really fast, I can kind of soften that look a little bit more. Also, if I kind of go in with some water, it kind of helps. But nothing's ever going to really lift that up again, kind of opposite from watercolor, right? Because water can kind of take away. That ink is permanent once it's on the paper, so it won't really come up very well. So I just wanted you to kind of see how that water affects it in case you have some wet areas you don't want to get your ink. All right, so I'm going to start making some different washes. So I want you to have 3 different levels of wash when you start. So you're going to make a light, a medium, and a dark. That's really all you need. You're welcome to make more. I feel like nothing really starts to change after about 3. Sometimes people make 5. I've learned just to make 3, okay? So when you're trying to get it lighter, do you think you need more or less water? More. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to get a different brush. Get one that holds a little more. I'm going to get a little drop of ink on my brush, not a whole lot. And I'm going to start, these are actually ones I already made, but I wanted to go ahead and start them fresh for you. So I'm going to make like 1 or 2 dots, and I'm starting with my light one at the bottom of my tray. Then I'm going to take my little canister of water. This is going to be my wash water. You can do this over the sink if this makes you nervous. This is why we use newspaper and wear art shirts. And because I need a lot of water, I'm going to fill it up pretty close to the top, not all the way so it doesn't spill. So this is going to be my lightest value. So I'm going to mix it up, that ink that I added, and I'm going to test it out. And you can see it pretty well. It's already starting to look kind of gray. So that's actually probably a pretty good light wash that I'm going to stick with. So it's not paper white, but it's not too dark. So that's going to be my lightest wash. It's normally not that easy. Normally you got to work a little bit more. All right, for my medium one, I'm going to do a little more ink and a little less water. So I'm going to do maybe like 4 little dots this time. It's not a perfect science. And I'm going to do it about halfway with water. So a little less water, a little more ink. I'm going to try my cleaner brush. I'm going to mix it up. Well, that looks the same. So I'm going to put more ink in there. So that's helping a little bit. That's getting a tiny bit darker. I'm going to pick up a little bit from the edge, put it into that water, mix it up again. So that's probably a good medium wash. Y'all see how those kind of look different? Light, medium, okay. All right, now I'm gonna do my darkest one. So with this one, I'm gonna do several drops of ink, kind of cover the bottom. And then I'm going to pour just a little bit of water in. And the amount of wash I'm making, y'all, you and your buddy next to you can use it the entire class. You probably won't need to make any more. We'll dump it out before we leave, and then we'll make the new stuff the next day, because it is like barely making anything, but it goes a long, long way. I always like to try to wipe off my brush before I rinse it. It keeps my water cleaner longer. All right, so I'm starting my darkest one. It looks pretty close, so what do you think I need more of? Ink. A little Finding Nemo. Ah, what do you say? You guys made me ink. You guys made me ink. Ooh, that's good and dark. All right. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to test it out on something else too, since I've got a lot of stuff going on there. I'm going to try to get a little darker, and this is where Miss Taylor always goes too far and gets way too dark. I just like making more. Whoa. See, I wasn't paying attention. All right, so that's a good dark wash. So these are my 3 different ones. Don't look at the darkest one. All right, I've got light, I've got medium, I've got dark. So those are my washes I've made. And I separated them just so I am not inclined to use the wrong one at the wrong time. I go light on the left, light to dark, okay? So now that I've got them kind of where I need them to be, I would probably change out my water at this point because it's gotten gross, my clean water. I could also, once this is done, this could also be my water to use. I mean, I don't really need to make washes anymore, you know what I'm saying? It's less to get up and have to do. If you share, it's way less for you to have to clean. So if you share a wash tray, if you share all this water, it's so much less for everybody to have to put up at the end. So it's kind of easier just to share this stuff. All right. For your example, what you're going to be doing, you're going to be working on our old friend, the light bulb.
Miss Taylor.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have Emma's zipper?
I do.
Can you please send her to the office for checkout?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so for my light bulb sketch, it's on watercolor paper. I've got the actual object sketched out. I've got my photo that I'm working from. I have the light bulbs up here. Somebody in 3rd block just kind of didn't grab one and made it up out of their head, and their sketch looked like that. So I really, really suggest that you look at the real thing and take a photo. That always really helps me. So I'm looking at my light bulb. I'm going to add that little bit of horizon line just because I really like breaking up my space when I'm doing value. When you look at this image, would you say that this part of the background is lighter or darker than the top of the bulb? It's lighter. So I would say that with my washes, this is probably a medium. The background's probably a medium. The top is a dark. The metal part is dark. The lighter highlights in here, maybe like a light wash, and then I'm going to keep some things totally white. So already I'm kind of making up a plan before I jump in there and just like try to figure it out as I go along. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to get my background a little bit of wash done. That's what I did in here, and I really liked it because it helped me kind of get used to what I was doing. So before I ever put any ink on or my wash on, I wet my background, and notice how my brush goes around the bulb. All right, trying to text me. Leave me alone. I'm in class. Go away. All right. That's what y'all need to be doing. Say, get my study on. All right. So I add a little bit of water to my background. You can see that my water is kind of dirty. It's already turning kind of wash-like a little bit. I'm just going to add a little bit more. And add a little bit more of my medium. There we go. So see how when I work quickly, it's not going to look streaky. I'm also using a bigger brush for a bigger area. And the only places that will run into each other if things are wet would be like if I worked in here and I tried to put something here, it would bleed into that. So anything wet's going to bleed together. So that's why I really was being very accurate about where I went. All right, so background happened very quickly. I'm going to move on and work in here because I don't want to work here, because if I try to do this dark, it's going to bleed in here. It's not going to go well. I'm going to get a little bit of a smaller brush that's sitting in my water, getting gross, but it's really good and fluffy, so it will move well. All right, so even here, I'm going to make sure that I've got a couple little highlights kind of drawn out where I need them to be. Thought somebody was knocking. All right, I'm going to keep my brush kind of moving. Oh, I need some clean water, y'all. All that. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and move in with my wash. So I try to keep it really soft, and I try to keep my edge pretty clean. I'm trying to keep all my highlights light, and I notice here that's where it's going to get a little darker, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to move pretty quick with my paper towel just because I want to kind of lighten some things. So see how easily I was able to get rid of that because I moved quickly. If you get a little bit extra of the water off, it'll kind of help get some things clean. So I'm working very lightly, okay? I'm going to move down to the metal part, and I'm going to always wet my brush. I'm going to use the clean water before I put it into the wash. I don't really want to wet this part because I want to get it a little more detailed. And I'm going to keep my highlights kind of light. So you can see in here, I'm kind of more like drawing with the wash and kind of being a little bit more accurate with it. I'm using it more on the edge. And the thing to think about with your washes is it's like paint. It needs layers and coats. So if it's not dark enough, do not go try to like make the world's darkest wash and get it really dark way too much at one time. You can layer it so it has to dry and then you get it a little darker. Just like with pencil, anything that we do, we try to get it kind of light to dark as we work. Okay, so I move around a lot because I don't want to really anything to bleed. I don't want anything to really bleed. So right now I can touch it and it feels pretty wet in some areas. So I could probably work on some cast shadow right now, and then I would just sit it to the side, fan it a little bit. This is the one I've been working on a little bit. So I'm going to come back to this and I'm going to start to darken some things a little bit more. I'm going to take kind of a pointed soft brush. At this point, I don't really want to wet a lot. Have y'all ever wet paper with watercolor a little bit too much? Have you ever seen what happens when your watercolor paper gets too wet? What happens? It does, it kind of rips. It kind of gets a little bit like shredded kind of feeling. So when you kind of scrub it with your paintbrush and you get it too wet, it's going to start kind of peeling up. It's called getting overworked. And right now I'm just working with the medium wash and I'm going very little bit at a time and kind of working around. And I'm just trying to really follow what it looks like. I see a little bit of dark kind of down in here. I want to add a little bit more. And this is very dry. This is my one from third block. I love doing as much detail as possible with the wash before I ever go into it with the pen. And I'm using the there it is, teeny tiniest little brush. So I just think it looks really beautiful, as much that you can get with that. You can get a little bit more, and you're kind of just like suggesting little details like that. So The way that I'm getting it to look like metal is just having a lot of dark next to light. That's kind of the way I'm getting it done. When I want to work on my cast shadow, I just keep it moving, really wet, and I can layer and layer and add a little bit as I go. But the biggest thing is just really paying attention to kind of where you're going. So once this is dried some more, I'm going to come in with my pen and I'm going to add some more little fun details with my pen to make it a little bit more exact. Okay? Do y'all have any questions about any